The first sign of the apocalypse wasn't fire from the sky or the dead rising from their graves. It was silence. A profound, unnatural, digital silence that screamed louder than any air raid siren. 1 second, I was in my element, basking in the cool blue glow of 6 monitors in my basement command center. The server racks hummed a soothing lullaby of controlled power. On screen, I was deep in the digital guts of my home media server, a glorious, over-engineered monument to my refusal to ever watch commercials again. Life was good. The next second, everything went black. Not a power outage. The overhead lights were still on, casting a sterile, lonely light on what was suddenly a $6,000 wall of dead glass. Every single monitor flashed the same 3 soul-crushing words: no signal. Simultaneously, the gentle hum of the servers died, replaced by the frantic, high-pitched shriek of a dozen uninterruptible power supplies kicking in at once. It was the sound of an orchestra of technological panic. My blood ran cold. "Okay, Alex, don't panic," I told myself, my heart already hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Systemic failure? Did a core switch just give up the ghost? I pulled up the network status app on my phone. No service. Not just no Wi-Fi, which was expected, but no cellular service either. The local cell tower piggybacked on my main trunk line for its backhaul. Of course it did. This wasn't a system failure. This was a disconnection, a physical one. My mind raced. A car crash into the utility pole. A clumsy backhoe operator digging where he shouldn't. My gaze drifted to the small security camera feed that was, of course, also dead. But I didn't need the camera. I had a memory from 10 minutes prior. A flash of beige pantsuit, a glint of sun off a laminated clipboard, and a look of righteous fury aimed at the side of my house. "No," I whispered to the beeping servers. "She wouldn't." I scrambled up the basement stairs, my fuzzy slippers, a treasured gift from my sister, making pathetic flapping sounds on the wood. I burst into the living room and tore to the front window, peering through the blinds. The sun was shining on our oppressively perfect street, Harmony Creek Lane. Mr. Henderson was watering his prize-winning petunias. And there, standing at the edge of my property line right next to the thick green utility box, was Carol. Carol Peters, president, judge, and jury of the Harmony Creek Homeowners Association. She was in her late 50s, with a helmet of blonde hair that looked like it could withstand a Category 3 hurricane and a sense of self-importance that could power a small city. In her hand, she held a large, gleaming pair of garden shears. At her feet, lying on the perfectly manicured grass like a slain serpent, was a thick, black cable. My cable. My brain stuttered to a halt, struggling to process the sheer, magnificent, catastrophic audacity of what I was seeing. The cable wasn't for my Netflix. It wasn't for getting a lower ping in Call of Duty. It was a shielded, redundant, military-grade armored fiber optic trunk. It was the hardened primary data conduit for the entire town's emergency response network. And she had just attacked it with something you'd use to prune rose bushes. I threw the front door open, the hinges groaning in protest. "Carol!" My voice cracked. It came out less like a roar of anger and more like the squeak of a terrified mouse. She turned, a slow, deliberate movement. She wasn't startled. She wasn't guilty. She looked smug. Triumphant, even. "Good morning, Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I see you've noticed the improvement." I stumbled across the lawn, my slippers becoming soaked with morning dew. I pointed a shaking finger at the severed cable. The clean, brutally precise cut was almost impressive. "What did you do?" I managed, my voice trembling with a cocktail of rage and sheer disbelief. "I am ensuring compliance," she announced, holding up the shears as if they were a scepter. I gave you fair warning. That unsightly, non-standard conduit was a clear violation of HOA Bylaw 17, Section 4, Aesthetic Uniformity. It's gone now. You can thank me later. Thank you. The words felt foreign in my mouth. Thank me. Carol, do you have any mortal concept of what you've just done? I've improved our property values by removing a visual blight, she said, puffing out her chest. You should have simply taken it down when I sent the first notice, and the second, and the final warning email. This is on you, really. The notices, laminated, of course, taped to my door with the kind of aggressive pressure that suggested a deep, personal animosity. I had ignored them, assuming it was a bureaucratic mix-up. I'd even sent a polite email to the city manager's office yesterday, asking them to clarify with the HOA that the offending conduit was, in fact, city-owned critical infrastructure. I figured one piece of bureaucracy would talk to the other and the problem would dissolve into the ether of paperwork. That was my mistake. I had tried to solve a human problem with logic. You can't reason with a zealot. My brain was trying to reboot. I was cycling through 1,000 scathing, technically accurate insults, none of which would penetrate the force field of her self-righteousness. Before I could land on one, my work phone, a bulky satellite-enabled brick that I kept for dire emergencies, began to buzz violently in my pocket. My blood turned to ice. It had only ever rung twice before, once during a statewide power grid test, and once when a lightning strike took out a backup generator at the hospital. This was it. I fumbled for the phone. The caller ID was stark and terrifying. Harmony Creek, 911. Dispatch. I answered, my hand shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Brenda? I said, my voice barely a whisper. Brenda's voice came through, tinny and laced with pure, unadulterated panic. Alex? Thank God! What is happening? Everything just went dead. The entire map server is down, the CAD system is frozen, we can't see any unit locations, the phones are still working on the old copper lines, but everything else, it's a total blackout. It's like we're back in the Stone Age. I stared at Carol, who was now meticulously wiping down her garden shears with a handkerchief she'd produced from her pantsuit pocket. She was dusting off her hands, a job well done. I looked at the severed cable, its complex, multicolored guts spilling onto the pristine green grass. I looked back at the woman who had, in the name of aesthetic uniformity, effectively unplugged an entire town of 50,000 people. She didn't just cut my internet. She just single-handedly declared war on modern civilization with a tool from Home Depot. Brenda, I said, my own voice sounding strangely calm, the kind of calm that comes when your brain has been overloaded and tripped a circuit breaker. Stay calm. I know what the problem is. I need you to listen to me very, very carefully. 10 minutes later, I was standing on my lawn trying to explain the digital apocalypse to Officer Miller. Miller was a man who looked like he ran on lukewarm coffee and existential despair. He'd pulled up in his patrol car with the kind of deep, theatrical sigh that told me he was already classifying this call under neighborhood nonsense. "All right, folks, what's the problem here?" he asked, his eyes scanning the scene with profound disinterest. Dispatch said something about property damage. Brenda had apparently just screamed, "He says a lady cut the wire," into the radio, which probably didn't convey the appropriate level of gravitas. "Officer, thank you for coming," I started, trying to keep my voice even and rational. "This woman," I pointed at Carol, who immediately adopted the look of a deeply wronged porcelain doll, "has just intentionally and maliciously severed the primary communications trunk line for the town's entire emergency services network." Miller blinked, once, slowly. It was a blink that contained entire epochs of bureaucratic apathy. "Oh, she cut your internet cable?" No, yes, but not just my internet cable. I was failing. I could feel it. It's the town's internet cable. The 911 dispatch system, the ambulance GPS, the fire department's automated alerts, the traffic light grid control. It all runs through that specific armored line. She cut it. With those, I pointed at the shears, which she was now holding behind her back. Carol chose this moment to step forward, her face a mask of sweet, grandmotherly concern. Officer, I would never do such a thing. I was simply tidying up the common utility area. Our bylaws are very clear about unauthorized fixtures. This gentleman has been very hostile ever since he moved in, always with his packages and his humming noises. Humming noises? She was complaining about the sound of my server fans? Through an insulated basement wall? The humming noises are keeping your town from descending into chaos, Carol, I snapped, then immediately regretted it. I sounded unhinged. Miller held up a hand. Sir, let's keep our voices down. Do you have any proof of this? That this specific cable is what you say it is? I gestured wildly around me at the placid suburban street. Proof? The proof is the absence of everything. The entire 911 system is down. Call your own dispatch, I dare you. Ask them how their day is going. They're probably trying to track your patrol car with a pushpin and a paper map right now. He actually reached for his shoulder mic, paused, and then seemed to decide it was too much effort. He was looking at me like I was trying to sell him a timeshare on Mars. Carol, meanwhile, was radiating pure, uncut victimhood. It was a masterclass. She was Meryl Streep in a beige pantsuit. Look, sir, Miller said, his voice taking on the tired tone of a man delivering a well-rehearsed speech. This appears to be a civil matter. Vandalism at worst. You'll have to take it up with your homeowners association or file a report for the cost of the damages. I can't arrest a woman for landscaping. Landscaping? The word exploded out of my mouth. It's a federal offense. Tampering with public utilities, destruction of critical infrastructure. We're talking felonies here, plural. Okay, sir. I'm going to need you to calm down, he said, taking a half step back. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, flimsy card. Here's a card with a case number. My advice? Call your internet provider. I'm sure they have a 24-hour service line. He pressed the card into my hand. It felt like a certificate of defeat. Without another word, he turned, got back in his car, and drove away, leaving me standing there, speechless with a rage so pure it felt holy. Carol gave me a tiny, triumphant little wave and retreated into her fortress of oppressive neatness. I was alone. The town was unplugged, and the only person in authority I'd spoken to thought the solution was to call Comcast. My satellite phone, my only connection to the world I was supposed to be protecting, felt impossibly heavy in my hand. There was only one other person who would understand the sheer scale of this screw-up. I scrolled through the contacts and hit the call button for Dave's Data and Electric. Dave, I said the second he picked up. I need you. It's an emergency. Alex, what's up? Dave's gravelly voice was a welcome sound. Did you spill a LaCroix on your motherboard again? I told you to get a coaster. Worse, so much worse. The HOA president cut my primary fiber line. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of a tool dropping. Wait, you mean the big one? The one we had to get a federal permit to bury 5 feet underground and encase in concrete? That one? With garden shears, Dave. No. Yes. With garden shears. That's what I said. Another long pause, and then a sound I didn't expect. A low, wheezing laugh that built into a full-blown cackle. You are kidding me. No way, she... Oh, that is beautiful. That's a work of art, and terrifying, deeply terrifying. I'll be there in an hour. This I gotta see. Don't touch anything. And for God's sake, Alex, take pictures, lots of them. An hour. In the world of network uptime, an hour is an eternity, a geological age. Every second that ticked by was another opportunity for Murphy's Law to run wild in the town of Harmony Creek. And I was stuck here, on my perfectly manicured, criminally violated lawn, waiting for the only man in a 50-mile radius who knew how to splice this cable without accidentally setting off an EMP and wiping out every pacemaker in a 3-block radius. I retreated to the humming, beeping chaos of my basement to try and triage the disaster remotely. The satellite uplink was slow, barely a trickle compared to the fire hose of data I was used to. But it was something. I managed to get a single, low-resolution map of the town online. It was static, a dead picture. Useless. Then the calls from Brenda started. Each one was a new chapter in our shared horror story. "Alex!" she yelled on the first call, her voice strained over the satellite connection. "We have a 2-car pileup on the I-5 bypass, right near the old quarry exit. We dispatched an ambulance 10 minutes ago. They're stuck in traffic because none of the downtown traffic light overrides are working. It's a parking lot. I'm trying to guide them using Google Maps on my personal cell phone, but the signal's spotty." I pictured it. A life-or-death situation being navigated by a stressed-out dispatcher on a cracked iPhone screen. While I was trying to manually ping the traffic grid controllers, which were all screaming back errors, I glanced at a small TV I kept in the corner, which was miraculously still getting a signal via an old-school antenna. A local news channel was on. "And we're getting reports of chaos at the annual Harmony Creek Founders Day Festival in the town square," the Chipper news anchor reported. "Organizers say a system failure has led to widespread logistical confusion. In a related story, fire officials are baffled by a series of false alarms, seemingly triggered by a network glitch that has set off sprinkler systems in 3 different municipal buildings." My sat phone buzzed again. It was Brenda, and she sounded even more panicked. "Alex, you are not going to believe this. The spillway gates at the Northwood Dam. They're on the network for remote monitoring and control." "I know, Brenda. It's a closed-loop system. It should be fine." "It should be, but it's not. It performs a mandatory handshake with your central server every hour for diagnostics. It just missed the handshake. So the system, in its infinite wisdom, has gone into lockdown mode. It thinks there's been a catastrophic failure. The gates are locked shut, and with the rain we had last night, the reservoir levels are rising. Fast. We can't get them to open, Alex." I felt the blood drain from my face. The dam. Of course the dam. It was the crown jewel of my network design. A system with triple redundancy, fail-safes on top of fail-safes. But I had made one critical hubristic error. All 3 redundant data paths ran through the same physical conduit, the one that was currently lying in 2 pieces on my lawn. Carol's crusade for aesthetic purity had graduated from a public nuisance to a potential natural disaster. She hadn't just tidied up. She had potentially doomed us all to a very, very wet afternoon. Just then, I heard the rumble of a heavy vehicle outside. I ran upstairs, my heart filled with a desperate hope. Dave's work van, a glorious beast of a vehicle plastered with logos for Dave's Data and Electric, was pulling up to the curb. Dave, a big man with a beard that had its own ecosystem, lumbered out of the van. He looked like a Viking who'd decided to retrain in information technology. He ambled over to the scene of the crime, nudged the severed cable with the toe of his steel-capped boot, and let out a long, low whistle that was equal parts awe and horror. "Holy mother of pearl," he rumbled, stroking his beard. "She went right through it, like a hot knife through butter. Clean cut, too. Gotta give her that." "Can you fix it, Dave?" I begged. "Just tell me you can fix it." "Fix it?" He looked at me, then back at the cable, then back at me. "Alex, this ain't a lamp cord. This is a 288-strand armored multi-mode fiber trunk. To fix this, I need my fusion splicer, a portable cleanroom tent to keep dust off the cores, and about 6 hours of uninterrupted Zen-like concentration and, he added, his face falling slightly, a specific type of outdoor splice closure that I haven't had to order in 3 years because nobody is dumb enough to need one. Where do we get one? I asked, my voice tight. There's one place, he said with a grimace. Northrop Supply. It's a dusty old warehouse in that industrial park on the other side of town. But with the traffic lights out, getting there and back is going to be a whole adventure in itself. It was perfect. A perfect storm of stupidity and bad luck. The one vital component we needed was on the far side of the very chaos we had inadvertently created. As Dave started unpacking his van, laying out tarps and a bewildering array of esoteric tools, a new horror emerged. The front door of Carol's house opened, and she marched out, clipboard in hand, a soldier returning to the front lines. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Excuse me, what is going on here? That is a commercial vehicle." I just stared at her, my mouth agape. Commercial vehicles are not permitted to be parked on the street for more than 30 minutes for deliveries, per Bylaw 24, Section B, she announced, tapping her clipboard with a perfectly manicured nail. I finally snapped. The dam of my politeness and conflict avoidance broke. "Carol, for the love of all that is holy," I yelled, taking a step toward her. "Are you serious right now? We are trying to prevent the town from turning into a water park. This man is trying to save us all from your horticultural terrorism." "Flooding?" she scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Don't be ridiculous. That's what the dam is for. It's perfectly safe. Now, I'm going to have to ask your associate to move his truck, or I'll have to report it." Dave, who had been methodically cleaning the ends of the fiber optic cable with a special wipe, slowly stood up. He was a good foot taller than Carol and about 3 times as wide. He wiped grease from his hands onto a rag, his eyes never leaving her. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "With all due respect, the only thing I'm moving in the next few hours is this cable. And if you come within 10 feet of my sterile work environment or my calibrated equipment, I'm going to file a report for workplace interference that'll make your little clipboard melt. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm on the clock. A very, very expensive clock." Carol sputtered. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time, she seemed to be at a loss for words, momentarily defeated by Dave's sheer, unshakable, no-nonsense presence. She shot him a look that could curdle milk, took a picture of his van's license plate with her phone, and retreated back into her house. "Note to self," I muttered. "Dave is my new best friend." "She's a piece of work, that one," Dave grunted, returning to his task. "All right, I'm gonna prep what I can here. You need to go on a supply run. Here's the list." He handed me a piece of paper with a part number scrawled on it. "Godspeed, my friend. Try not to get carjacked." Just as I was about to get into my own car, my satellite phone rang again. The caller ID was a name I feared almost as much as Carol's. Mayor Thompson. I answered with a sense of profound dread. "Henderson! Is that you?" The mayor's voice was high-pitched, a frantic squeal of pure panic. "What is going on with my network? My press secretary can't get her email. The town website is down and it just shows a picture of a cat. A cat, Henderson! Do you know how this looks?" "Mayor," I said, pinching the bridge of my nose so hard I thought it might snap. "With all due respect, I'm less concerned with how it looks, and more concerned with the fact that the Northwood Dam is about to overflow and wash half the downtown historic district into the next county." "The dam? Good heavens!" he shrieked. "Can't you just reboot it? Turn it off and on again?" I took a deep, calming breath. "It's a dam, Mayor, not a Dell laptop. Someone physically severed the main data trunk." "Severed? Who would do such a thing? Was it saboteurs, anti-government extremists?" he whispered, suddenly conspiratorial. It was Carol Peters, I said flatly. The HOA president, with garden shears. There was a long, stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears grinding in his politically attuned brain, trying to calculate the fallout. Ooh, the lady from the pancake breakfast fundraiser? The one with the prize-winning begonias, Carol? That's the one, I confirmed. Oh dear, he whimpered. Oh, this is very bad for my polling numbers in the 55 and over demographic. Henderson, fix it. Fix it now. And keep this quiet. We'll call it a scheduled system-wide upgrade. Yes, that's it. Proactive maintenance. He hung up before I could reply. A scheduled upgrade. I was living in a cartoon. A poorly written, deeply stressful cartoon, and I was the only one who hadn't read the script. I looked at the part number in my hand. I looked at my car. It was time for the mad dash. Getting into Dave's van was a strategic decision. My sensible hybrid sedan wasn't going to cut it in the urban jungle Harmony Creek had become. Dave's van, on the other hand, was a 2-ton beast of steel and pragmatism. It had presence. Okay, buckle up, Dave said, throwing the van into gear. This is going to get sporty. He wasn't wrong. Driving through our normally sleepy town was like navigating a demolition derby run by lunatics. Every intersection was a nightmare of indecision and aggression. Cars were nosed into each other at bizarre angles. People were laying on their horns, creating a constant, cacophonous symphony of frustration. Okay, the satellite map says turn left up here, I said, squinting at the choppy, lagging display on my laptop, which was plugged into the van's inverter. It should be clear. The map is a lie, Alex, Dave yelled, slamming on the brakes as a convertible driven by a teenager with more confidence than sense tried to mount the sidewalk to bypass the gridlock. The map doesn't account for human stupidity. Just honk, I yelled back, feeling useless. Use your size. Be the bigger van. I run a respectable business, Alex. My slogan is, your data, our duty. I can't just go full Mad Max on Main Street, Dave protested, even as he laid on the industrial-strength air horn, which let out a blast like a freight train. The convertible swerved back into line. The dam, Dave, I pleaded, my voice cracking. Think of the dam. Dave sighed, a heavy, world-weary sound. All right, but if I scratch my rap, you're buying me a new one. He became a different person behind the wheel. A maestro of vehicular mayhem. He expertly weaved the big van through gaps that shouldn't have existed, using the horn not as a weapon, but as a surgical instrument. We careened through back alleys, bounced over curbs, and at one point drove through the middle of a very startled garden gnome convention on someone's lawn. We finally made it to Northrop Supply, a low, dusty brick building that looked like it hadn't been updated since the invention of the fax machine. An ancient man with a magnificent mustache sat behind the counter, reading a newspaper. Need a D288 FOSC? I panted, sliding Dave's note across the counter. He looked at it, then looked at me over the top of his reading glasses. Haven't sold one of these in years, he grumbled, disappearing into the shadowy aisles. He returned a few minutes later, blowing a thick layer of dust off a cardboard box. Last one in stock. You're lucky? We weren't lucky. We were just on the receiving end of a statistical improbability. We paid the man, grabbed the box like it was the Holy Grail, and sprinted back to the van. The journey back was even more frantic. The chaos had intensified. I was getting panicked text messages from Brenda over the satellite link. Water at auxiliary spillway level. They're talking manual override, 15 minutes max. While we were stuck at a completely frozen four-way stop, I glanced at Carol's house as we passed my street. I didn't have time to stop. I just had a feeling. Something was happening. Carol Peters was on the phone with her sister, Gladys. She was pacing on her immaculate cream-colored carpet, venting about the indignities she had suffered that day. "And then the big, rude contractor had the nerve to threaten me," she said, her voice filled with righteous indignation. "I was simply upholding the standards that make this community so desirable. Honestly, Gladys, the quality of people they're letting in these days, it's appalling." In the background, the constant wail of sirens was becoming impossible to ignore. It was a new, unsettling background noise to her life. On her 70-inch smart TV, which was only working because it was tethered to the cellular data on her phone, a red banner suddenly flashed across the bottom of the screen. "Emergency alert. Northwood Dam spillway malfunction. Widespread communications failure, hindering response. Residents in low-lying areas advised to prepare for possible evacuation." Carol's house was on a gentle slope, but it was one of the lower ones in the prestigious Estates section of Harmony Creek. Her prize-winning begonias were in a very low-lying area. She stared at the screen, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. A communications failure? How could that be? She looked out her pristine picture window. She could see the flashing lights now, not just hear them. They were down the street, near the bypass. She looked across at my house. It looked like a disaster zone. A big van, tarps on the lawn, strange equipment blinking. It was all very unseemly. Then there was a knock at her door. Not a polite tap, a firm official rap. She opened it to find Officer Miller standing there. It was the same cop from that morning, but he was transformed. The weary apathy was gone, replaced by a grim, focused intensity. He wasn't here to discuss landscaping. "Carol Peters?" he asked, his voice flat and cold. "Yes?" "We need to talk," he said. "Right now." The first crack appeared in the foundation of her certainty. Why is he looking at me like that, she thought, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. It's just a cable, a silly, ugly black cable, right? By the time Dave and I skidded to a halt back in my driveway, dusk was falling. The scene on my lawn was surreal. Dave had already set up work lights, casting long, eerie shadows. In the center of it all was a small, transparent plastic tent, the portable clean room, set up directly over the severed ends of the cable. It glowed like a strange terrarium. "Took you long enough," Dave grunted, grabbing the box from me. "Get on the horn with your dispatch, lady. I need a countdown." I scrambled to the makeshift command post I'd set up on the hood of my car, my laptop open, my sat phone pressed to my ear. Dave disappeared into the clean tent, looking like a surgeon about to perform a delicate operation. "Brenda, what's the status?" I asked, my voice tight. "Bad, Alex, so bad," she cried, her voice cracking with strain. "The water is at the auxiliary spillway level. They're standing by the manual override lever. They're going to pull it. It's going to cause downstream flash flooding, but they say it's better than the whole dam failing. They need a systems handshake in the next 5 minutes, or they're pulling the lever." "5 minutes, Dave," I yelled toward the tent. "We have 5 minutes." "Do I look like a miracle worker?" His muffled voice came back. "This is art, Alex. You can't rush art. I'm aligning the cores now. There are 288 of them, and they're the width of a human hair. Don't breathe too hard." I watched, mesmerized, as he worked under a magnifying lamp, his big, greasy hands moving with the impossible delicacy of a watchmaker. He was using what looked like a pair of high-tech tweezers to align microscopic strands of glass. It was at that moment that Officer Miller walked onto the lawn. He wasn't alone. He had Carol in tow, holding her gently but firmly by the elbow. Her face was ashen. The smugness, the certitude, the righteous indignation, it had all evaporated. In its place was a dawning, horrified comprehension. Her eyes darted around the scene. She saw the intense focus on Dave's face. She saw the frantic look in my eyes as I barked updates into the phone. She saw the screen of my laptop, which I had angled so she could see it. On it was a live graph from the dam's sensor array, which had just re-established a weak link. The red line representing the water level was climbing steadily toward the blue line that represented catastrophic failure. "Oh my," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. The sound was barely audible over the hum of the generator powering the lights. What have I done?" No one answered her. We didn't have time. "2 minutes, Dave," I shouted. "I'm on the last quadrant. Don't rush me." "Brenda says they're unlatching the cover on the manual release." Dave ignored me. He was in the zone. His movements became a blur of hyper-focused efficiency. "Splicer is heating. Fusing now. Nobody move a muscle." Inside the tent, the fusion splicer, a small, sophisticated machine, glowed brightly for a second. It let out a single, quiet beep. Dave leaned back, his whole body slumping. "It's done," he breathed, his voice hoarse. "The splice is complete. Powering it up. Let's pray to the network gods." He flipped a switch on a small power box. I stared at my laptop screen, my heart in my throat. The network status icon, which had been a glaring, angry red for hours, blinked. It turned yellow. For one agonizing, eternal second, it stayed yellow. My soul left my body. Then it turned solid green. At the same instant, all 6 monitors in my basement, visible through the window, flickered to life, bathing the room in their familiar blue glow. The angry beeping of the battery backups fell silent. Brenda's voice erupted from the phone, a scream of pure, unadulterated joy. "We're back! Alex! We're back online! I have the dam controls, the gates are responding, it's working, it's working!" A collective sigh of relief washed over the lawn. It was so profound you could almost feel it. Dave stumbled out of the tent, covered in sweat, and gave me a weary thumbs up. I slumped against the van, my legs turning to jelly, utterly spent. We had done it. The celebratory mood was shattered by Officer Miller clearing his throat. The sound was sharp, official. He turned his full attention to Carol, who looked like she might faint. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His tone was cold, hard, and final. "Carol Peters," he said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "You are under arrest for felony destruction of public utility property and felony reckless endangerment." Carol stared at the handcuffs as if they were alien artifacts. "But, she stammered, her voice a pathetic whisper. "But the bylaws—" "The bylaws don't supersede the United States Code, ma'am," Miller said flatly, clicking one cuff around her wrist. "You have the right to remain silent." The sharp click of the second handcuff locking into place was the loudest sound in the world. As Miller led her toward his patrol car, she looked at me, her eyes wide with a desperate, pleading confusion. It was the look of someone whose entire, neatly ordered world had been proven to be a fiction. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the last 8 hours of my life, the potential for mass flooding, the fact that I missed the season finale of Succession, and Dave's invoice, which was probably going to be astronomical. Yeah, the feeling passed. 1 week later, I was back in my sanctuary. The basement was cool, the servers were humming their gentle lullaby, and all the lights on all the network switches were a beautiful, reassuring green. I was on the phone with Dave, a beer in my hand. "So the city's insurance is covering your entire invoice, plus a 20% hazard pay bonus," I said, smiling. "Hazard pay?" Dave chuckled on the other end. "You mean my dealing with a weaponized HOA president fee? Should have charged more. So, what's the final word on her?" "Bailed out, but she's not having a good time," I said, taking a sip of my beer. "She's facing a mountain of charges. The city, the county. I even got a call from a guy at the Department of Homeland Security. Apparently, they take a dim view of civilians attacking critical infrastructure. The HOA board resigned en masse via a tearful Zoom call. It's beautiful. My other line rang. The caller ID was Mayor Thompson. I switched over. "Alex, my boy, my hero!" he gushed, his voice syrupy with false sincerity. "The town is saved. We're telling the press the scheduled system upgrade was a resounding success, a testament to our town's commitment to proactive governance. As a token of our gratitude, we'd like to offer you a key to the city." "Thanks, Mayor, but no thanks," I said dryly. "How about you just make sure the new HOA bylaws include a 'Don't touch Alex's goddamn wires' clause, in writing, notarized, and laminated." I hung up and went back to Dave. Peace was restored. Later that evening, I was sitting on my front porch, enjoying the quiet. For the first time in a week, there were no sirens. It was just the gentle chirp of crickets. It was bliss. A moving truck was parked across the street. A new family. A friendly-looking guy in his 40s ambled across the lawn, a welcoming smile on his face. "Hi there," he said cheerfully. "Just moving in. I'm Tom. Heard a bit about the excitement last week. Crazy stuff." "You could say that," I said, nodding. "Welcome to the neighborhood." "Thanks," he said, extending a hand, which I shook. "Anyway, it's been a whirlwind. With the old board resigning, they had to hold an emergency election for the HOA. Total mess. Guess who got roped into being the new president?" He pointed at himself with both thumbs and gave me a huge, folksy grin. I froze. My beer, halfway to my lips, stopped dead in its tracks. I stared at Tom, the new, cheerful, friendly face of my potential future torment. For a second, I felt that old, familiar dread. But then something new sparked. I thought about the black screens, the panicked calls, the race against time. I thought about Dave's competence, Miller's transformation, and Carol's stunning downfall. I had faced the apocalypse in a pantsuit and won. A slow, weary, but very real smile spread across my face. I took a long, slow sip of my beer. "Tom," I said, my voice even and calm. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I think you and I are going to have a lot to talk about." He laughed, oblivious. I just smiled. Round to two, I was ready this time.